Welcome back to MVM. Today we have a Kickstarter preview. This one is for Winterborne from Talon Studios. It is a 1 to 4 player deck building / kingdom building game.
Yeah, it's also kind of a rondel game as well. You have a rondel mechanic. You're moving your pieces around to trigger abilities and interact with provinces.
All right, so we have a 4-player game setup, and as you notice, this takes up quite a bit of table space because the game board is actually made up of these 6 different provinces. On the provinces, you have a number of different tiles in which you're going to be moving around and collecting, but you're not moving on the actual game board. You're moving on your own personal kingdom board.
Yeah, each player is going to start with a house board and a kingdom board that you see out here in front of me. The house board tells you what all your actions are and gives you the settlements and churches and a special Winterborne power. Everyone is going to be dealt out one of these randomly at the start of the game. And then you orient your kingdom board so it's the same orientation as the province board, but your movement and building is all done on your own map.
So each player's personal kingdom board is going to have their individual setup according to a card that is dealt out to each of the players. This is where the actual rondel takes place because you're going to be moving these 3 tokens around in a circular clockwise motion. And when you do that, you're actually interacting with this board itself. So everything that you see here reflects this actual province board in the center.
And there are 3 different types of figures you'll have. Your red warrior, your blue shaman, and your green explorer. They all do different things. And you're going to move these figures around the board by interacting with them by playing these cards that you can build into the deck building aspect. Everyone starts with a starting deck of cards based on their house that is identical, but you're going to change and build that as you play.
Talk a little bit more about the kingdom board. When you look at this kingdom board, you're going to notice, as we said, you have these gray spaces around the outside of it. Those are the places you're going to actually be moving. The flags are places you're going to be placing new tiles on when you take a very particular action. And then each of these inner areas actually reflect the tile on the board. That's why you orientate it in that particular pattern. All right, so as Ryan said, you each are going to start with a deck of cards. Besides the deck of cards, you have a number of other different tokens within the game. You have your food and your military in the game. You have your favor tokens, which are going to interact with the cards that you have from your Winterborne powers. You have gold, which is again going to be able to be used to be able to power specific actions. And then you actually have the round track. The round track is going to consist of a spring, summer, and autumn, and then a winter. And this is actually going to be player dictated on how long the game takes because each of these different rounds has exploration cards that have to be pulled off the board and placed onto these locations. You're not going to move into the next round until all those cards have been taken.
That's right, and then it'll make sense when we get to that action. But yeah, the crux of the game is to explore and take these cards to build your deck. But if people don't explore a lot, the game can go a little long. But generally, it's not going to be more than about 90 minutes.
All right, so on your turn, what you're doing is you're going to have a handful of 4 cards. Every player has 6 cards at the start of the game. They're going to draw out 4 of those, and they're going to use those to take a multitude of different actions. Every single one of these cards is going to show one of the 3 different types of tokens that you have. So you have 2 cards that represent your warrior, you have 2 cards that represent your shaman, and then you have 2 cards that represent your explorer. However, each of these base cards is also going to show icons on the left-hand side that again reflect that particular token. It's also going to reflect movement, and then it's also going to reflect either a forest or some kind of other action you get to take.
Yeah, a lot of those bonus icons just give you coins or military or food or trigger certain in-game things. But what you're going to use these cards to do most of the time is to move your characters around the rondel. Moving is done very interestingly. So every turn you're going to play a card for one of these symbols. If you choose the symbol that matches one of your figures, you also play another card and choose the movement. So it can be a little complicated, but if I played these cards together, I can move my red warrior 1 space. And I look at my kingdom board, I move my warrior 1 space, and then I get to interact with the tile that I'm adjacent to.
Right.
Now, on a previous round, if I had put more of these tiles out, I'd have a couple more options as to the tile I interact with. But at the start of the game, you're only going to get to interact with one of those tiles.
And depending on the token that you move on that turn, whether it's the explorer, the shaman, or that warrior itself, that's the action you actually get to take with that token. And on your player board, you're going to actually see those different actions. Your warrior is actually going to be able to go out there and collect those new settlement tiles to play them adjacent to them. As you notice on your board, your warrior is going to have 2 locations that he's always next to, and those are going to have outlines on the outside saying whether it's a blue or a black location or a blue or a black location that you're actually pulling from and placing it on that particular area. That's called conquer. And when you conquer, you have to give up some combination of resources in order to do that. But the warrior can also, instead of conquering, he can actually go out there and he can build. And when you build, you're building these settlements or churches into those locations. It's going to serve a multitude of different purposes. One, it's going to give you in-game victory points for sets, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But the other thing is every time you move your shaman around the board and you pass through one of those settlements, you get a free coin from doing so.
That's right, yeah. So there's a lot going on that you have to balance. So every time you conquer, you take one of those tiles out, like you said, and you place it adjacent to the area you would have conquered. Then in a future turn, you can take off one of yours and place it there. So your board is going to start to take shape. You're going to add more of these tiles. You're going to be adding these houses and uncovering them as you go. In addition, every time you conquer, you get to take a spoil from that province.
That's good. It's huge.
Yeah, and you'll see these spoil tokens printed or placed here on the bottom. You get your choice of any of the three. So I could, take whatever spoil token. It sits out in front of me, and then I can use that token either to give movement instead of playing a movement card, to trigger a character instead of playing a character card, or to give me some other kind of bonus like a free tile, like what this one gives me right here.
What does the shaman do? When your shaman ends its position from moving, he has one of 3 different actions that he can actually take. One of them is to simply to tax. So when you tax, you're just gaining coins and military to be able to use other actions in the future.
Right.
You also have the ability to trade with the location that you're adjacent to. Each of these different tiles is going to have trade cards. And on these trade cards, they have a variety of different things, trading in something to get something. And they're usually points that you'd be able to gain at the end of the game from doing so.
Yeah, every time you trade with one of these allies, for example, I could turn in 1 food to get a favor token here. I also have a relationship with that ally now. I put that card face down in front of me, and at the end of the game, I'm going to get victory points. Every one of these ally cards has victory points printed, or it might be actually an in-game scoring, like certain number of victory points for having other cards in your deck.
The final thing you can do with your shaman is you can actually pray. When you pray, you're going to gain one of those favor tokens. You can use those favor tokens at any time during your turn, and what they're going to do is they're going to interact with your Winterborne power. You're going to notice on here you have 3 different times you can use that.
Yep.
You place it on there, and then you get to use the ability of that card. And there's a wide range of those, and every player is going to have one unique one of those at the start of the game.
Yeah, and those 3 Winterborne spaces correspond with the 3 winter turns, and we'll talk about that when we get to the winter phase.
All right, and the final thing you can do on your turn is you can enact and move your Explorer. And this is how you're going to be able to pull some of these cards and start building out your deck. Each of these locations is going to have a card on it that you're always going to be able to visibly see. When you stop your Explorer in that location, you're allowed to gather one of those cards. And to do so, you actually have to pay some combination of resources. The tricky thing is that combination of resources is going to change depending upon the season or the round that you're in. At the very start of the game, it's going to cost you any 2 resources of your choice, but as you progress, it starts to tell you very specific things that you need in order to do so. Those cards that you're gathering help you build out your deck, but they also act as points and set collection through the course of the game.
Yeah, there's several different types of cards. Most of these cards, though, when you take them, they go directly into your hand.
Yeah.
So you can actually use those cards that turn, which kind of adds to that timing element between pulling Explore cards and using these spoil tokens in front of you. You can extend your turn past the 4 cards you get to play.
What's really neat, too, is some of those cards can actually play off to the side of your board, and you get to choose when you want to use them. So if you don't have a good hand of cards to use that particular power right then, you can set it off to the side. Now, there's cards that have those scroll symbols on them, which means you set them aside, but you do have only the ability to hold 3 of those at any one given time. At any one given time.
And that includes a special kind of card, these WYLDS cards. These are rare in the game. There's not many of them. But when you get these, they never go into your deck. They sit aside. And every time you play a card with the forest symbol, which there are a lot of cards that have that symbol, instead of getting nothing, you could actually get one of your printed bonuses from your WYLDS cards.
And the unique thing about that is, as you just mentioned, those forest cards are typically dead within the game unless you have those wild cards off to the side of your board. The unique thing also about those cards is there's 5 different types of cards you're going to be collecting. 4 of them are going to be set. Not only are they going to power things you get to do, but they're also going to act as set collection at the end of the game. You're going to get points for every set of these or combination of the sets that you have. And then you have a 5th type of card, which are banners. These banners also interact with those cards. They're not part of the set, but they give you points depending upon what's on the bottom. For example, how many provisions you have or how many treasures you have.
Yeah, there's a ton of different sets of banner cards, and based on the number of players, you're going to slot in a certain number of those sets before the game starts. But they score a ton. Basically, anything you can do in the game can be scored from one of those banner cards.
And you're going to keep playing round after round, introducing new cards when those exploration cards come out. This is going to progress this. Once this stack is gone, you're going to move over to the summer, and you're going to keep doing that until the end of the game is triggered. Once that happens, you're going to score up victory points. As we said, you get points from your exploration cards, but you also get points from your settlements. This is a thing we kind of skipped over because we want to talk about it right now. Settlements, you're going to look at areas that you have that have the same colors together, times the amount of settlements that you have.
Yeah, for example, if you can see my player board here, I have 2 provinces, but only 1 building on those 2. So that's only going to score me 2 points, 2 times 1. However, if I had built a second one here, that's now 4 points. You could get up to 9 points, 3 times 3. But if you look at your board, you can't do that for every province because these overlap in certain ways. Only certain provinces can ever have 3 tiles on the board at once.
And remember, you're matching colors. So it's the color combination or the color block that you have in that location times the number of settlements. So
yeah, but that is a huge way you're going to get points. Also, collecting those sets of exploration points is going to be huge. So you can play this game heavy conquer and fill out your board with conquers and builds, or you can just get a lot of exploration cards and score points that way.
So that is Winterborne. It is from Talon Studios. If you guys have any questions about the game, make them in the comments below. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and now also follow us on Instagram. And we'll catch you guys next time.